Hello and welcome to my continued review of the brand new Codex Space Marines. Apologies that it's been a couple of weeks. The way Games Workshop are kind of releasing the new models from the Codex seems in touch with the way I've made these review videos of the separate sections. So this will be my review of the Elite section. It's the largest, most bloated section in the Space Marine Codex. It never used to be like that. It used to always be heavy support. But yeah, in the new Codex, there are no less than 26 separate units in the Elite section, which is astronomical. And in the old Codex, there's 24. So you're getting 2 extra. In the, I say cheaper Codex, it's £25. The old one was 30, but of course now you're going to have to pay these £17.50 Codex supplements or whatever they are. Anyway, let's go through it. As always, new Codex on the right and the old Codex on the left. So if we just jump on over to the Elite section, right here. Likewise, in the new book, it starts off about here. Okay, so first things first then. The new Codex kicks off with the Primaris Apothecary, and then it goes on to the Apothecary. The old Codex was with the Primaris Ancient and then a Chapter Ancient. The Apothecary didn't feature until a little bit later on, and the Primaris Apothecary and normal Apothecary were in completely different areas. So what I like to do is start off with the new book by saying that the Primaris Apothecary, let's compare it to the old one. The power points cost, it has gotten cheaper. It's a power points cost of a 3, and the old one was a power points cost of a 4. His stat line is different. He now gets an extra attack, so he's got 4 attacks now, but the rest is exactly the same. The Reductor Pistol is the same, same damage, same AP. The Absolver Bolt Pistol, again, exactly the same. Obviously, the Primaris Apothecary, it's got the Angels of Death. The stat line reads for the Primaris Apothecary: movement of 6 inches, weapon skill and ballistic skill both 3+, strength and toughness of 4, 5 wounds, 4 attacks, leadership 8, and a save of 3+. Of course, the new one has this Angels of Death rule, and it has the Narthessium, which is, again, exactly the same as in the old Codex. Keywords: Imperium, Adeptus Astartes, Character, Infantry, Primaris, and Apothecary. Speaking of apothecaries, the new book then focuses on the standard apothecary, which is the same power points cost. Yeah, bizarre. The other apothecary, again in the old book, is same power points cost, but it's a page before. Their stat lines though are exactly the same. Their weapons are the same rules. Obviously with the abilities, the apothecary's got the Angels of Death and the same keywords. In the new Codex, it then displays the Primaris Ancient, which was actually the first entry in the old Codex. It's taken a points dive as well. It's a bit cheaper. It's a power points cost of a 4, whereas before it was a power points cost of a 5. His stat line is exactly the same, which is a movement of 6 inches, weapon skill and ballistic skill both 3+, strength and toughness of 4, 5 wounds, 4 attacks, leadership 8, and a save of 3+. Armed with exactly the same weapons, bolt pistol, bolt rifle. He's got this Angels of Death ability, and then the Astartes banner, again exactly the same. Talks about the Company Ancient. Now, there was a Company Ancient in the old book, right here. Same power points cost, and exactly the same stat line, which is a movement of 6 inches, weapon skill and ballistic skill, both 3+, strength 4, toughness 4, 4 wounds, 3 attacks, leadership 8, and a save of 3+. Exactly the same weapons, and the same war gear options. You've got, instead of one bolt pistol, you can have a bolt gun on one weapon from the combi weapons, or from the melee weapons, or one weapon from the pistol weapons. So you can choose different pistols now for the Company Ancient. Pretty good. It's got the abilities Angels of Death and the Astartes banner, which is exactly the same as the Primaris Ancient. Obviously, normally what you're getting with Primaris is an extra wound and an extra attack. everything else usually stays the same. They might not have access to sort of kind of better weapons. They might not have access to the full range of weapons as normal kind of legacy Space Marines, I want to call them now. Then it goes on to the company champion, and then in the old book they have a company champion that has changed slightly, same power points cost, but the company champion in the new codex has an extra attack. It's got 4 attacks, so movement at 6 inches, weapon skill 2+, ballistic skill 3+, strength 4, toughness 4 and 4 wounds, but of course it's now got this 4 attacks, leadership 8 and a save of 3+. Exactly the same weapons as before, same abilities. Got the Angels of Death, which is the new one. You've got Honour or Death. Instead of before, which was you can re-roll any failed to hit rolls for the model in a fight phase when targeting a character, what you've got instead is it can perform a heroic intervention if there are any enemy units within 6 inches of it instead of 3 inches. If any of those enemy units is a character, and when doing so, can move 6 inches instead of 3 inches, move closer to the closest enemy character model. Also, the combat shield is the same, but then you've got martial superiority, which is a new thing. If the model is within 1 inches of any enemy character models at the start of the fight phase, it can fight in the fight phase even if it did not charge. If the enemy has units that have charged or have similar ability, then alternate choosing units to fight with, starting with a player whose turn it is taking place. And then also another ability, so this company champion's pretty buff, superlative duelist. When resolving an attack made with a melee weapon with this model against a character unit, you can re-roll the hit roll and you can re-roll the wound roll. So company champions have got quite a big buff. Not only have they got 4 attacks now, they've got all these extra little abilities, which makes them even more of a must as an elite choice. The Honour, not only can they re-roll hit, but also wounds against characters. Very, very good. Then the next entry is the company veterans. Company veterans are here as well in the old codex, exactly the same stat line there, which is a movement of 6 inches, ballistic skill and weapon skill 3+, strength and toughness both 4, 1 wound, 2 attacks, leadership 8 and a save of 3+, and the sergeant is exactly the same stat line except for he gets an extra attack and a better leadership, as most sergeants do. Weapon wise, they've got exactly the same weapons. War gear options, it's just worded slightly different, because in the new book you've got the sergeant weapons list, and it goes on to say that instead of 1 chainsword, 1 bolt gun, you can have a combi weapon, melee weapon, pistols. You can also have this storm shield as well. Abilities, they've got the Angels of Death new rule. It just talks about the Storm Shield having a 3+ invulnerable, and then you've got the Command Squad Bodyguard. It just goes on to say that only 1 attempt can be made to intercept each attack, so it's just added a little bit onto that Command Squad Bodyguard. Keywords: Imperium, Adeptus Astartes, Infantry, Company Veteran. Sorry that I've missed those in the other elite entries. Then we flip to Servitors. They're a bit cheaper as well. They're a power points cost of a 2, whereas before they were a 3. Their stat line is exactly the same, which is a movement of 5 inches, weapon skill and ballistic skill both 5+, strength 3, toughness 3, 1 wound, 1 attack, leadership 6 and a save of 4+. Bit of a shame that they don't kind of overemphasize or work with a Primaris Tech Marine if and when they ever do release them with the mine lock ability. That would be pretty cool. But the weapons are exactly the same. You've got the servo arms, a plasma cannon, a multi-melter and heavy bolter. They're cheap as chips. They don't have an invulnerable save or anything like that, and they've only got 1 wound each, so it's a lot to invest in, like, a plasma cannon. But if you keep them safe, keep them in cover, they might work quite well. But the war gear options, it just goes on to, it's exactly the same, and the mine lock ability is exactly the same as well. Basically, weapon skill and ballistic skill 4+, and leadership characteristic of a 9. Imperium, Adeptus Astartes, character, infantry and servitors. Then we flip to Ancient in Terminator armour. In the old book, you didn't have this. Didn't have this anywhere, this Ancient in Terminator armour. Look everywhere, but he doesn't exist. So it moves on from the Ancient, from Company Ancient, Primaris Ancient, to this Ancient in Terminator armour. and he has the same number of wounds as the Primaris one. He's a power points cost of a 5. Obviously I've got nothing to compare him with, but his movement of 6 inches, weapon skill 3+, ballistic skill 3+, strength and toughness both 4, 5 wounds, 3 attacks, leadership 8, and a save of 2+. Got a Storm Bolter and a Power Fist. He's got the Angels of Death special rule. He's got Teleporter Strike, Crux Terminatus, obviously 5+ and vulnerable, and then he's got the Astartes banner, same as the Astartes banner before. Comparing him to a Primaris Ancient, which is a bit cheaper, he's got 1 less attack, but he does have the Teleport Strike and the Invulnerable save, and a Power Fist. So, you know, whether you think that's worth it, you know, obviously you're going to have to put the Astartes banner somewhere on him as well, but pretty cool that you can have a Terminator just milling about, you know, on his own as an ancient. Yeah, keywords: Imperium, Adeptus Astartes, Character, Infantry, and Terminator Ancient. Speaking of Terminators, nice little segue onto the Terminator squad. Just moving on before we get to the main sort of units. In the old Codex, gone are the Honor Guard. So we don't have the Honor Guard anymore, and we don't have the Crusader squad. Bit of a shame, but there we go. But moving on, we've then got Terminators, which you have to move back quite a bit. So Terminators, they have had quite a good, decent power points reduction. They're now a power points cost of a 9 instead of a 12. The stat line is exactly the same though. It's a movement of 5 inches, weapon skill and ballistic skill both 3+, strength and toughness are both 4, 2 wounds, 2 attacks, leadership 8, and a save of 2+. The sergeants are the same, but with 1 extra attack and 1 extra leadership, as always. Same exact weapons. Again, if you've got 5 of them, 1 of them can have a weapon from the Terminator heavy weapons list. Can have chain fists, and they can take that teleport Homer. They've got the same ability. They've got the new ability, Angels of Death, combat squads, teleport strike, Crux Terminatus, teleport Homer. So they work very similar to the old one, but just a bit cheaper. Then we've got the Terminator Assault Squad, which is actually on the next page. So that's one of the similarities there. Again, they've been reduced to power points cost of a 9, and they've got exactly the same stat lines there. They've got the lightning claws, they've got the thunder hammers, storm shields. They've got exactly the same abilities, obviously, with the exception of that new Angels of Death ability. Then you've got Cataphractii Terminator Squad, which are on the next page as well. A power points cost reduction down to 10, and they were 12 before. Exactly the same stat line, still very, very decent. They've got the grenade harnesses, they've got the heavy flamers, they've got the 2+ normal save, and then the 4+ invulnerable. They're solid units, they really are. Moving forward, you've got the Tartarus, exactly the same, but these have had a bigger power reduction cost. They're only 9 as well, so it's beautiful that all the Terminators, no matter what flavour, except for the Cataphractii, are now power points cost of a 9, whereas before the Tartarus Terminators, for some reason, were more than the Cataphractii. There were 13 power points cost, which is ludicrous. They've got exactly the same stat lines though. The save of 2+, they've got that 5+ invulnerable save. Why would you take them over the others? Well, you can have Volkite charges, you can have the Reaper autocannon, which is a 4-shot weapon. You can teleport strike them, combat squad them, and their movement is 6 inches. They're very fast little Terminators. You know, they're fast in Cataphractii, which are 4 inches, and normal Terminators are 5 inches. So to have, you know, Terminators huffing it along the field at 6 inches is pretty fast. Who needs a Land Raider when you can run 6 inches? Anyway, moving on, we've then got Vanguard Veteran Squads. They are here, and they've had a power points cost reduction down to a 6 from a 7. Their stat lines are all exactly the same, which is a movement of 6 inches, weapon skill ballistic 3+, strength 4, toughness 4, 1 wound, 2 attacks, leadership 8, and a save of 3+. The sergeant, obviously, 1 extra attack, 1 extra leadership. Exactly the same war gear there. War gear options: you can have a relic blade, same as before. You can have the storm shields, you can take melter bombs, you can have jump packs, of course. You've got the Angels of Death ability, combat squad, storm shield, Like before, it just explains that, and the jump pack assault. So nothing's really changed with Vanguard Veterans, they're just a bit cheaper. Then it goes on to Stone Guard Veteran, and as you can see, well maybe not, but they've had a reduction in cost as well. Power points cost of a 6 instead of a 7, and they've got exactly the same stat line there. They're still pretty decent. They've got this special issue bolt gun, which is a 30-inch range, rapid fire 1, strength 4, AP -2, and a damage 1 weapon. You used to have different ammo for them, but now you've got that. Of course, you can give them, you know, special weapons as well, and heavy weapons. They're pretty good to drop out of a drop pod or whatever, and you know, melt a tank or plasma gun, high value target. Then we're on to the dreadnoughts. Wow, quite a lot of dreadnoughts now. Big power points reduction from a 7 down to a 5, exactly the same stat line there, which is a 6-inch range, weapon skill, ballistic skill 3+, strength 6, toughness 7, 8 wounds, 4 attacks, 8 leadership, and a save of 3+. Exactly the same weapons as before, same stats for them as well, and the same war gear options. Got the Angels of Death, which is quite nice. Got explodes and smoke launchers. Ironclad Dreadnought then, which is a power points cost of a 7. That's reduced by 1 though. Exactly the same stat line there, which is a movement of 6 inches. Weapon skill, ballistic skill, both 3+. Strength 6, toughness 8, wounds 8, 4 attacks, leadership 8, and a save of 3+. Everything's exactly the same as before. Obviously, it's got that Angels of Death rule. Moving on, you've got Venerable Dreadnought, which is right there. Again, that's had a big power points cost reduction compared to a normal Dreadnought. That's again now 6 points instead of it used to be costing 8. Exactly the same stat line there, which is a movement of 6 inches. Weapon skill and ballistic skill both 2+. Strength 6, toughness 7. 8 wounds, 4 attacks, leadership 8, and a save of 3+. At this point, I don't know why you wouldn't just pay the extra power points cost and get the Venerable, because you're getting the weapon skill and ballistic skill both 2+ instead of 3+. You're getting Unyielding Ancient rule, which is worth it, which, you know, on a D6 of a 6, the wound is not lost. I think that's worth the extra points cost in my opinion. Then you've got Contemptor Dreadnought. Now, speaking of fast Dreadnoughts, unfortunately, I don't get this. Like Games Workshop with vehicles and things, some vehicles are affected by the damage that they take. Normal Dreadnoughts aren't. You know, but yet when we get to Contemptor, it does start to affect its movement speed. Anyway, its normal movement speed is 9 inches. It's exactly the same stat line as it was in the previous codex. Same 4 attacks, 10 wounds, toughness and strength are both 7. Pretty decent. You've got that Carey's pattern assault cannon, which is a lovely weapon, but it can only take 1. It can't dual wield them in this codex at least. You've got the Angels of Death rule, the Atomantic shielding, and it can explode. It's a power points cost of a 6. I overlooked that, compared to an 8. So again, that's a big reduction there. Then Redemptor Dreadnought. This has had a massive reduction of -3, so you've now got a power points cost of a 7 for a Redemptor Dreadnought. It used to be a 10, exactly the same stat line, same number of wounds and attacks, leadership and save, exactly the same weapons as before. Nothing's changed, except for that, obviously, Angels of Death special rule. Then you've got this new Dreadnought. Is it a Dreadnought? That's debatable, but you've got this Abomination. I can sort of compare it to a normal Dreadnought, which is a power points cost of a 6 now. You know, I'll go through its stat line. So it's one of these where its wounds affects its stats. So if it's got 13 wounds, its movement is 10 inches, weapon skill 3+, and ballistic skill 3+. If it's got 4 to 6 wounds, its movement speed drops to 8 inches, weapon skill drops to 4+, and ballistic skill 4+. And then if it's got 1 to 3 wounds, its movement speed drops to 6 inches, and its weapon skill is 5+, and ballistic skill 5+. So already, movement of 10 inches, that's incredible. You know, you compare that to the Contemptor Dreadnought of a movement of 9 inches. You know, 9 inches is very fast, so you're getting an extra inch with this guy, but that's not the only thing. It's got some new weapons. It's got this Incendium cannon, which is a 12-inch range, heavy 2d6, strength 5, AP -1, and a damage of 1. And when resolving an attack made with this weapon, do not make a hit roll, it automatically scores a hit. Pretty nice. You can get up to 12 shots, I suppose, with that. It's got the Fragstorm grenade launcher and heavy bolter and incendium cannon and 2 iron hail heavy stubbers and the Invicta Fist already on it. You can swap out that incendium cannon to a twin iron hail auto cannon, which is a range 48 inches, heavy 6, strength 7, AP -1 and a damage of 2. You got 6 shots there, not D6 or anything like that. You're definitely getting 6 strength 7 shots. So you have a couple of these, you're getting 12 shots at 48 inch range. It's got an effective range there of 58 inch range, so it can bomb about the battlefield. On top of that, it's got this concealed position, which we'll talk about in a moment. But the Invicta Fist, it's a strength of ×2, which will be 14, AP -3, and a damage of 3. It's exactly the same as normal Dreadnought close combat weapon, which is pretty good actually. Then it's got the Iron Hail Heavy Stubber, of which it's got 2 of them, so that's 6 shots then, at range of 36 inches, strength 4, AP -1 and damage 1. It's alright, nice extra 6 shots though. Then it's got the abilities Angels of Death, Explodes, Concealed Position, so when you set up the model during deployment, it can set up anywhere on the battlefield that it's more than 9 inches away from enemy deployment zone and enemy models. And then Heavy Sidearm, whilst this model is within 1 inch of any enemy units, its heavy bolter has a type characteristic of pistol 3. Pretty good. Yeah, keywords Imperium, Adeptus Astartes, Vehicle, Invicta, Tactical Warsuit. So it's a pretty decent Dreadnought, especially if you get 2 of them. You know, rules wise at least, it's very cheap. It's armed to the teeth with a main weapon, 2 side weapons. It's also got the Fragstorm assault launcher, which is alright. You know, it's an assault weapon, 18 inch strength 4 weapon. But then it's got that heavy bolter as well, and the fist. Pretty decent Dreadnought, even though it looks crap, in my opinion. Then it goes on to the Reaver Squad, which they do feature in the previous codex, but you have to go back all the way back to here. They've dropped, believe it or not, down to a power points cost of a 4. They were a 5. They've got exactly the same stat line, which is a movement of 6 inches, weapon skill and ballistic skill both 3+, strength 4, toughness 4, 2 wounds, 2 attacks, leadership 7 and a save of 3+. They've got these bolt carbines, which are a range 24 inch, assault 2, strength 4, AP 0 and a damage of 1. It says here that every Reaver can be equipped with 1 combat knife instead of 1 bolt carbine, which gives them an extra attack when they fight. So they're pumping out 3 attacks each. You get 10 of them. That's a fair number of attacks there. Then you've got Reaver Sergeant, again, can be equipped with that combat knife instead of the bolt carbine or the pistol. Every model can have a grav chute, every model can have a grapnel launcher. So they work exactly the same as they did before, but obviously they've got the Angels of Death rule. They've still got the Terror Troops. It just goes on to say that it multiplies up to a maximum of -3. So each Reaver unit, if there's 2, then obviously that's reducing the enemy leadership by -2. So that's pretty good addition, because before it was a bit wishy-washy, didn't say if it's stacked, and we now know it does. After a Reaver Squad, we've then got the Aggressor Squad, which is on the next page. That's had a power points cost reduction down to a 5 from a 6. It's got a slightly different stat line now, in the form that they've got 3 wounds and 3 attacks, so they're very, very good now. Movement at 5 inches, still quite slow, weapon skill and ballistic skill 3+, strength 4, toughness 5, 3 wounds, 3 attacks, leadership 7 and a save of 3+. You multiply that with the Sergeant then, and the Sergeant is now getting 4 attacks, which is pretty good, because with those gauntlets, whichever one you use, yes, you have to subtract 1 for the hit roll, but they are getting 3 attacks each, or 4 for the Sergeant, and they're exactly the same whether you get the Bolt Storm gauntlets or the Flame Storm. I don't know why they put them both, but they just do. I suppose they have to, because they've got the range profile as well. But other than that massive change there of an extra attack and an extra wound, they pretty much work the same. Obviously they've got the same abilities, but they've got the Angels of Death, they've got the Firestorm, and they've got the Relentless Advance, so they can move, and so they don't suffer penalty for advancing and firing assault weapons, so they can still advance, which they'll probably need. But they're not that slow, but yeah, nice to have 3 wounds now and an extra attack. Then we go on to the Centurion Assault Squad, which are all the way forward past the Dreadnoughts, Are they past their knots? Yes, they're right here. These have had a huge power points cost reduction. They're now power points cost of an 8. They used to be 12. They've now been bumped up again. They've had the aggressor treatment. They've now got 4 wounds and 3 attacks each. Brilliant. So annoyed that they were only getting 2 attacks because they're so expensive, and their weapons, the siege drills, are very, very decent. But other than that, they work exactly the same. They've got the Hurricane Bolters, they've got the Melter Guns, they've got the Siege Drills, they've got the Angels of Death, the Omniscope, they've got the Combat Squads, and the Centurion Assault Launchers. And that is it for the new book. The old book, you know, had 24 elite choices. The new book, of course, we get the Invicta Tactical Warsuit, which is the new elite choice, and we get that new Terminator, Ancient Interminator armour. So yeah, pretty decent in terms of elites. You've got more elites than you can shake a stick at. Too many in my opinion. That it's really bloated, I feel. Nice, you know, points reduction in lots of these elites, definitely with the dreadnoughts. I think that was much needed, and I do like the tweaks with the aggressors to make them a bit better, and also the Centurion Assault Squad. Anyway, what do you guys think of the Space Marine elite section? It is the largest section in the book. It's absolutely massive, far outweighs the heavy support and HQ sections. Please do put your thoughts and opinions down below. It'd be great to hear from you. Thank you ever so much for joining me today. Thank you for watching. The Emperor Protects.